Hi everyone, it's Sherry from Our Life Homeschooling. I am so excited to share with you an interview that I had with my friend Bev. We got together and talked about homeschooling through different seasons of life. Bev was the very first interview I had years ago when I started my YouTube channel. So it was great to catch up with her and just talk about how things have changed and what her homeschool looks like now. So let's dive into this conversation with Bev. My name is Sherry, Christian, wife, and thankful mom to 10 incredible kids. I'm the author of the blog and YouTube channel Our Life Homeschooling, where I share homeschooling encouragement for everyday moms. I believe that motherhood is ministry, and homeschooling is simply an extension of parenting. My passion is to cheer on other moms who are at home doing the most important work of all, raising the next generation for the glory of God. Hi, Bev.
Hey Sherry, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me.
It is a joy to be back here.
Yes, you were the very first interview I did, which was, I want to say, was it
Four,
3 years ago?
no, it was 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
And
So,
it
any of
felt
you
less,
that want to search back on YouTube and find that, or maybe I'll just link it so people can see. I feel like people love that kind of thing, seeing what happened several years ago, even when it was like my first and we were both awkward, and that's just what people love.
yes, although it was slightly less intimidating then because you had zero viewers. And now you have
Yeah.
a couple thousand, so I feel like the pressure's on. No, I just hope that whatever I say is honoring to the Lord, and that's all that matters.
Yes, that's right. Yes. And you're in a completely different season now than you were 4 years ago. I mean, things change so much. But why don't we'll start kind of at the very beginning again, and you can reintroduce yourself to my viewers and tell them what attracted you to homeschooling.
All right, well, my name is Bev. I've been married for 18 years to my best friend, Mark, and we have seven children aging from 1 year old to 16. And I've now been homeschooling for 10 years. So even thinking about that sounds so crazy to me. Um, so what attracted me to homeschooling? It's actually interesting because if you had asked me 15 years ago, or even maybe even earlier than that, if I would ever homeschool my children, I probably would have laughed in your face. I think the words at one point ignorantly came out of my mouth that I would never homeschool my children because I didn't want them to be weird. And I genuinely believed that. I was very I just wasn't exposed to homeschooling and had lots of wrong impressions about it. And at the time when the Lord started to change our mindset, my husband and I were both volunteering at our church youth group. And I remember the day so clearly. I was talking to a young man, and he was just very poised, really easy to talk to, was considerate and very socially adept. And I said to him, like, "Oh, where do you go to school?" And he said, "Well, I'm homeschooled." And I was like, "No, you're not." He said, "Yes, I am." And I just remember being so surprised. And that's when the Lord started to really tune my heart to the possibility of homeschooling. And then
Mm.
flash forward, in our marriage, Mark and I have hosted 8 exchange students. So even before we had
Mm.
kids, when our kids were really young, we had these students in our home who we just adored and treated as our own kids. And they would leave our house at 6 o'clock to go to school. And because they were exchange students, they were involved in all the sports. And they would not come home until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And then they would be
Wow.
held with the rest of the evening doing schoolwork or studying for exams. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to lose my children to a system where they're gone all day long. Like I missed these
Mm.
students. And then flash forward to when I was a mother of my own, I just didn't want to pass my kids off so that someone else could enjoy them.
Right. Yes. I completely relate to that. I felt the same way when we started with Ty. The thought of him being gone all day when he was only 5, it just seemed so long. It's such a long time, and they're so little.
And even because a lot of our exchange students were high schoolers, and I remember they would just come to us at night and just want to talk to us and want to be friends with us. And I remember thinking, like, let alone being 5, but when they're in the most impressionable years of their lives in high school, that's when I want them home with me so that we can
Yeah.
have those conversations. And even now, having teenagers, just thinking of the amount of time and attention that I can give to my kids and
Hmm.
not feel like I'm wrestling a school, whether it's a Christian school or a public school. I don't have to necessarily share them the way that I would if they were, sent out to an institution to learn.
Right, all day long. Yeah. That is one thing I love about homeschooling teenagers is the impromptu conversations that happen so naturally throughout the day, and I'm there for them. And I just love that. It's treasured. It's something that I'm so thankful for. So can you tell again, what are the ages you have now?
So I have 7 children, 5 girls and 2 boys, and they are 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, 5, and then 1.
Okay. And so your kids that are in school, what grades are they?
So kindergarten, second, fourth, sixth, freshman in high school, and then a sophomore in high school.
Oh, wow. You have 6 in school.
Yeah, and 2 high schoolers.
Oh my. Okay, so you are in a completely different season of life now than when we talked last. What does it look like for you? Just a typical day in this season, having high schoolers and some elementary, and then also having baby Kate.
Yeah. It is a lot of plate spinning at all times. And I feel like when I can keep them spinning well, things go really smoothly and we have a good routine. And then when one plate drops, I'm like, like everything falls apart. And we need to like realign the plates so I can juggle them again. But that's okay. It's okay to like reset the
Yeah.
plates every now and again.
Hmm.
So we start every day at 7:30. And that is like when I become teacher mom, at that time when I put on my teacher hat. But I start the day at 6 o'clock when my husband and I wake up together, and we typically eat breakfast together. And then I have my time with the Lord where I am just quiet before the Lord and can read my Bible and pray, which is one of those things that can feel cliche, but it is such a like spiritual pulse for me to just realign
Hmm.
my heart and remind me of what I'm doing. And even as the Lord will tell the Israelites, like, you are not fighting this battle, like, I am fighting for you. And just reminding
Hmm.
myself of that every morning is just very important because it's amazing how quickly we forget that. And we try to do it by our own strength, which then is accompanied by a lot of frustration and fear and all of those things. So I do have some early risers who are just very gung ho, appreciate the homeschool model of being able to get their school done by 11. But if they are awake, they are not allowed to talk to me. Like I mean, within reason, they're not allowed to ask me any
Yeah.
questions because I just really value that time as sacred. And
Mhm.
I tell them, like, if you want me to be the best mom, then I just need to have this quiet time where you can be around, you can be present, but I like this time is sacred for me. So that is like between 6 o'clock until whenever the baby wakes up. But then at 7:30, we are all down at the couch. And that is when we like start our morning meeting. And at that time, we are reading the Bible together. First, we just go over the basic plan for the day. Like, it's amazing how that just sets the trajectory of the day when the kids know what to
Mhm.
expect, they know what's happening. We review what chore rotation we're on, so the kids know exactly what the expectations are. If the kids have tennis lessons, that's going to affect our morning. So just
Mhm.
like reminding everyone so we're all on the same page. And then we always read the Bible together, where we just read a chapter of the Bible and we break it up into verses. So all my readers are practicing reading the Bible aloud, but also just allowing us to all be on the same page and study God's word together. And then we always finish by going over and reviewing the memory verse that we're studying. And we're currently memorizing Colossians 3, 1 through 17. And it's been months that we've been memorizing. And we finally got to verse 17 and it feels like such victory. But I really want to encourage like every mother that I speak to that children can memorize God's word.
Yes.
My
Hmm.
5-year-old has memorized Colossians 3, 1 through 17 in completion.
Wow.
She stumbles over her words and it's the cutest thing with the little like list. But that's something that the Lord taught me when my oldest was young, and I almost found out by accident, but it is a treasure for our family that we memorize chunks of scripture together. And
Mm.
she doesn't always know what it means. Like she doesn't understand sexual immorality at this point, but she will someday, and the word
Yeah.
of God is already on her heart.
Yes.
Anyways, that was a very long introduction to our time. But then once we leave there, we go on to breakfast, and the kids each have a different morning routine where two of them make breakfast, two of them do chickens and bunny duty, and then two of them either wash sheets or throw in a load of laundry. And that rotation switches every week. So the kids are learning how to make breakfast, they're learning how to take
Mm.
their home, and they're learning how to take care of the animals outside. And then I'm just around helping with either the baby or just popping myself in wherever is needed. And then we all eat breakfast together, and oftentimes we'll do memory work unless I'm just really tired. And then sometimes I just while they're eating breakfast. And then around 9 o'clock, that's when we transition to like the first school chunk of the day. And
Hmm.
I this year start with my non-readers or the ones who are beginner readers. And
Hmm.
my older kids are really not allowed to interrupt during that time because I want to give that designated time to the kids. And during that time, my older kids are working on their independent work. And if they have questions, they really just have to try to figure it out on their own or wait until I'm done with the littles until
Hmm.
they can ask me those questions. And then when they are done, I often will send them to do independent play and then work with my older kids while Kate is napping.
Yes. That sounds really similar to us. Exactly. We have morning time, independent work, then we break for lunch and oh, I forgot chores. Morning time, chores, independent work, break for lunch, and then the afternoon we read together. But very similar. Yeah.
And
Same.
I typically read during lunch. So when I'm making lunch for the kids, I will eat as I'm going. And then while they're all putting food in their mouth and don't want to
Yeah.
talk, I will read aloud to them. So we're currently reading Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And
Oh, I've never read that one.
it is so good. And we're learning all about just different yeah, I shouldn't even give it away. I won't tell you what it's about, but it's just really, really and the kids love
Yeah.
it. Always begging for one more chapter.
Well, looking back to where you were, it is probably hard to remember, but where you were 4 years ago to today, what would you say has changed having older kids as opposed to when you were younger? They were all little, and now it is different because you have kids that are a lot more independent.
Mhm. It's interesting because I was looking back at my last video 4 years ago and I was surprised by how much is the same. Just because when you are a homeschooler, you will hold high the things that are most valuable to you. So,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of morning time, table time, which we'll often do in the afternoon with the kids, Bible memorization, Bible time together, those things have not changed, like the daily flow of our day.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that has changed is gone are the days when all my kids do everything together. And in a hard transition, but thanks to like dear friends like yourself who have gone before me, I was prepared for it and ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I often quote to myself a quote by Corey Ten Boom that says, hold things in your hand loosely because it hurts less when the Lord pries them open.
Oh, so true.
Yes. And I just remember when I try to hold on so tightly to my kids or even to a season of life, I just remember like, no, this is good. Like this is part of their growth and
Yeah.
maturity. And rather than resist it and become bitter or just live in the past, like I want to be excited for my kids and excited for the things that the Lord has for them. But
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, that takes the discipline of my own heart to be willing to like switch my mindset in order to do that.
Right,
So
right.
like there are days like my two older kids have jobs. So there are days where we come to do morning time and they're already off to work.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I was like, where are my kids? Like, um, but again, like that, the core part of our homeschool is the same, but just then who is the
Who's
focal
there?
is
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that has really been like a huge difference over the past 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do miss having our older boys for our read aloud time. They're not there anymore. And I miss it, but at the same time, it's they've moved on and they're doing things that they've matured and it's good. It's a good thing, but it's sometimes hard for us as moms to accept.
Especially because we love them.
Right, right. Yeah. So, what can you think of some mistakes that you have made? Because I think it's helpful when we share what we've learned to help other people avoid those same mistakes.
Yes. I how much time do we have? I feel like I am constantly learning and still learning. And sometimes I know something, but then I need to relearn it again.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
actually, one thing happened today that I was like, this is such a great example of something that I've learned and a mistake that I've made. And a big part is knowing that when I am homeschooling, that is my primary ministry. That is the primary thing that I can do. My kids are where I need to be. And if I was a teacher in the public school system, that would be my job. I would go to school and that would be my focus. And a lot of times I try to balance other things or even will get distracted and focus on other things. And then my kids need me and I get annoyed and frustrated because
Yeah.
they need me. And just today, like everything was quiet. So I was like, oh, I'm going to listen to a message from a friend. And so they were all quiet working around me. So I'm making lunch and I put in an earbud and started listening to a message. And then one of my kids was like, hey, mom, can I ask you a question? And I was like, no, I'm doing something. It probably sounded not as kind as that. Um, but I kind of reacted at their desire to need me. And the Lord was very kind. I'm able to like switch gears a lot quicker. But in the
Mm.
moment, I was like, I'm actually really sorry. Like, this message is secondary. And I responded to you like you were interrupting me when I was in a conversation. And
Mm.
you had like, you didn't know that I was listening to a message. I had an earbud in. But I think often when we try to do too many things at once, we're going to set ourselves up for failure. So
Mhm.
I learned don't do the budget during the homeschool day.
Yeah.
Not why.
Not a good idea.
Don't reply to like important emails during the homeschool day. Or what I could have done is just said, hey guys, there's a message that I'm going to listen to. Please don't interrupt me. And I could have
Yeah.
just clearly communicated that, but I didn't. And I ended up needing to repent to my kids and apologize to them for really them doing nothing wrong. So
Right.
I think just having proper perspective of like that, there will be a time for that. And to just take a deep breath, but also realize like when you do mess up, the most humbling and gospel thing that you can do is to just apologize to your kids and
Yes.
remind them, like, you're right. In this moment, I put this message before you, and I'm sorry. That was not right of me. And they're so forgiving. They're
They
so,
are.
sometimes I feel like more forgiving than I can be sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a good, very timely reminder to me, like, what is my ministry and hold that high.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I had a similar incident recently. I was out in the kitchen and I picked up something. I think it was one of my sewing tools or something, and it was broken. And I was just immediately so annoyed because as parents, how many times have we had our kids break things that we love? And right away, Brinley was there, and I was like, if you're gonna borrow this, I don't mind, but just you have to put it away. And I didn't say it that nicely. And it wasn't her. And and it wasn't broken. But when I first looked at it, it looked broken. So I had to go back and apologize. And yeah, I think kids really respond well to that because they see humility and we're setting the example for them.
Yeah, and to just remember that we're all broken and we're all sinful, and
Yes,
the what we're trying to have them attain is not perfection of mommy, but it's Christ,
right.
his righteousness and his perfection. So mommy needs that grace just like you. And that's a really sweet reminder for all of us.
Yes, I agree. Can you give some tips on teaching multiple ages? We're both in this same category, I feel, right now, because I have high schoolers and babies, toddlers, and then elementary kids. What would be your advice to a mom who has multiple ages while she's homeschooling?
Do your best at the beginning to create self-propelled learners.
Yes, I agree.
I learned this almost by necessity because I shared in my last video, my first one, that when I get pregnant, I have debilitating sickness for about 20 weeks, where I am pretty much in bed all day, every day for 20 weeks. And it was, I mean, it's challenging. It has definitely been like the perfect picture of love lays down his life for another, like perfect love.
Hmm.
But it has been hard. And I remember when the kids were little, I could just kind of put them in a room with toys and lay on the couch with my puke bucket. But as I got older and we're homeschooling, I felt a holy responsibility to do well before my children. Um, but I also was incapable of giving them 100% of who I was. So
Hmm.
I just remember laying on the couch and I would hand them a workbook and say, okay, can you go work on this workbook page? And they would go and come back and they would have accomplished it. And in that kind of trial and error, sickness and pregnancies, I learned how how much my kids were capable of and
Yeah.
how by me doing everything for them, I was actually holding them back from what they were capable of accomplishing. And not only that, but they had a joy of being able to accomplish. They were able to take pride in their work and take ownership of their education. And
Hmm.
maybe they just pitied me, but they seemed to enjoy it. They had joy in bringing their accomplished work back to me. So from a very young age with my oldest, once I taught her to read, I was kind of like, okay, go learn now. And I became more of their coach as they got older rather than spoon feeding them information. So that was new for me because being in the public school system, I think that is what I expected to do when I first started homeschooling. But it
Mhm.
really showed me that my job is to teach them to read and to teach them how to learn. And then, really, once you are at that point, I'm just a really a cheerleader, a coach. I
Yeah, a
definitely am available if they
facilitator.
have questions. Um,
Hmm.
but I also tell them, like, I don't know everything. Sometimes mommy has to research something online or go to the library. And if I can do that, you can do that too.
Right, right.
So I've given them the tools. They all have our librarian's email address so they can email the librarian if they have questions, or just books that they want to pull. The other thing is something silly, but my husband gave me this idea when my kids were younger because I always felt like everyone needed me at the same time. And I would get easily overwhelmed. And we bought these wooden blocks. They're like 1 inch wooden blocks. And he spray painted them red, green, and yellow. So what happens is they each have these blocks, and we've used these on and off just to like reset the expectations.
Hmm.
But when a child is doing work and they have no questions, they put the green block on top. And then if the child has a question, but it's not urgent, they'll put the yellow block on top. And if they have a question that they can't move on with what they're working on until I help them, they put the red block on top. And it's nice because rather than saying like, mom, 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 they just have these nonverbal cues to tell me, like, I actually have an urgent question. So if you could get here as soon as possible. And all
Yeah.
I have to do is like glaze the room and see who needs me.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great idea. That is really, really great. That's something practical that people could really use. Well, tell me then, we're getting low on time here. Tell me how you find the joy in homeschooling. You've been homeschooling for a long time. And so it's you've been through the highs and lows,
Mhm.
and you're still homeschooling and you still love it. So how do you find the joy?
This one I am super passionate about because I just feel like when we are called to something, we as moms, I think, or just as women, can believe the lie that our feelings are truth. And
Mm,
I often have to remind myself and just people I talk to, like a feeling is real, but it doesn't make it true. So just because a feeling is real doesn't make it true. And
mhm,
I think that it can be easy to get frustrated, get overwhelmed, and then start believing things that aren't true. And I just really love the idea of like wanting to be joyful in the work that the Lord has for me and wanting to know truth. So I speak a lot of truth to myself. And it reminds me of in the scriptures in Philippians 4, where it tells us to set our mind on things that are true and noble and holy
mm,
and pure. Because it works when you remind yourself of truth. So even today, in the midst of that trial I had with my son, in that moment, I wanted what I wanted, but I had to tell myself, no, Bev, you need to discipline your heart and your mind to do the right thing, even though you don't feel like doing the right thing. And when you do the next thing and the next right thing, then joy follows. So I think just walking in truth and then reminding yourself of the truth of the gospel and of the mission of what we're doing and reminding yourself of the purpose of that is ultimately going to shape your mind into then feeling those things. But
mm.
obedience is not always joyful, but there is joy in obedience.
Yes, the fruit of it is joyful.
Yes.
Mm.
Um, and I was going to share a quote that I have from Amy Carmichael that I often repeat to myself too. Okay. Amy Carmichael said, joy is not mere jolliness. Joy is perfect acquiescence, acceptance, and rest in God's will, whatever comes. And that's such a sweet quote for me because I think sometimes we attribute joy with jolliness. And we think if I'm going to have joy in motherhood or joy in homeschooling, then I must feel jolly all the time. And that's not true. I think we need to remind ourselves that joy is doing the good work that the Lord has called us to, and then honoring the one to whom we worship. And when we know that and can conform our minds to that mission, then
Mm.
the joy of Christ, which is available to us, is there. But that doesn't mean you spend all day laughing or that you spend all day with a smile on your face. But it does mean that you can have the joy of knowing that you're doing what Christ has called you to.
Yes, and what's pleasing to him. Yes, that you're honoring him and pleasing him in your obedience,
Mhm.
doing what he's called you to do. Yes, that's so good. Well, thank you so much, Bev. This has been fun for me. I always love catching up with you, and I know this is going to be encouraging to so many people. It's always encouraging to see other everyday homeschool moms just faithfully doing the work that God's called us to. So, thank you for sharing your story, and I'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sherry. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this encouraged you. I do one video a week on homeschooling encouragement for everyday moms. I'll see you next week.